Hey, welcome to Season 6 of the Two Text Podcast. I'm here with my co-host David Harvey, and my name is John Andrews. So this is a podcast of two friends from two different countries meeting every 2 weeks to talk about the Bible. Each week we pick one text to talk about, which invariably leads to us talking about two texts and often many more. Now this season we're exploring Jesus' I am sayings in John's Gospel and how they draw us into a bigger vision of who Jesus is.
Well, John, in the last episode, my goodness, such a beautiful web was being woven for us by John 9 and John 10 about Jesus as the gate. Jesus is the one who finds, the one who opens the door, and the one who is the door. So we get in a world of gatekeeping. God doesn't send us a different gatekeeper. He sends us a gate, and he is our gate. And
come on, I love
my
that.
goodness. But of course, one of the things we said early on in this series was that the language of Jesus is never accidental, and it's never just, oh, I need a metaphor to explain this. So whereas in this last episode, we really located the I am the gate statement within John's gospel and the physical narrative that's happening at that time.
Yes.
The phrase I am the gate, I mean, it's not just plucked out of nowhere, is it? Jesus doesn't just see some gatekeeping and think, oh, I'll say something alternate to that. The notion of the gate has Old Testament resonances like the other I am statements, doesn't it?
It does, and I think on two levels this often happens in the teaching of Jesus. You get sort of a double level idea where, and we'll see this in Good Shepherd as well, where you get a very clear, that there's almost a very clear practical landing that people might understand. So as we've seen already, I am the bread, and Jesus talks about the manna and feeds the 5,000. I am the light. He does that during Hanukkah, and you have this incredible festival of lights and celebration of the temple, which is amazing. And then we've got the gate here, which I think at a very simple level, people who've seen shepherds at work would understand, because quite literally, the shepherd might be living out in the fields with the sheep, and therefore literally sleep with the sheep or sleep around the sheep. And I think, as I alluded to in our last podcast, some of my cultural research and studies show that even at times the shepherd would lie across the entrance of whatever sort of makeshift pen the shepherd had constructed, so to both protect, stop stuff going in, but also to ensure that the sheep don't go out. So you get literally a physicality of the gate here in terms of that. So I think there's one level there, but of course there's another sort of gorgeous illusion. I think especially this takes place in Jerusalem, and I think you can't think of gate and not think of the gates leading into the temple. I mean, I think there's an incredible sort of illusion there within that the gates would open up to allow the people to come in. You know, you got this gorgeous language, pre-temple language, actually, in Psalm 24. Lift up your head, O you gates, that the King of glory may come in. Yes. So there's this idea that the holy shrine, which eventually became a holy place, the temple, the gates were to open so that the King of glory would come in, so that the righteous could enter in, etc. And there's a gorgeous allusion to this in Psalm 118. Now, of course, for our listeners, we may know, you may know that Psalm 118 keeps popping up in the life and ministry of Jesus. So we've seen it on a number of occasions. And in fact, I think there's a dynamic sort of nuanced reference here that sort of comes our way. But in Psalm 118, it says this, verse 19, open for me the gates of the righteous. I will enter and give thanks to the Lord. And then it says this is the gate of the Lord through which the righteous may enter. I will give you thanks, for you answered me. You have become my salvation. And then it goes on to say this in Psalm 118, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Now, again, we know that allusion. That's an allusion to Jesus himself. That's quoted in the New Testament on a number of occasions. And so you get this, even Jesus quotes this of himself in the context of his teaching. So it is not a stretch, I don't think, that in the same psalm that refers to the builders rejecting the stone that becomes the cornerstone of this new building that Jesus is constructing, the ecclesia, that actually in that same psalm, you have this reference to this is the gate of the Lord through which the righteous may enter in. And so there's almost, in both those allusions in Psalm 118, a personification of the cornerstone, the stone, and the gate. So I think, again, I wouldn't want to overcook that or overstretch that, but because of the reference to the psalm for things like the stone and the cornerstone, I don't think it's a stretch to also see Jesus as identifying the personification of the gate. And of course, if you're alluding there to the temple, then the gate was the gateway to the presence of God. The gateway was the way into God. And that absolutely fits with our conversation around the blind man. Jesus becomes the gate through which the blind man enters in and is restored to community and to the community of salvation. So I think, I hope that's not an overcook or an overstretch, but I think that's worth a nudge, at least in considering that Jesus hasn't plucked simply a local picture, but he's leaning into a dynamic psalmic metaphor and picture of him as the gate for the righteous.
Yes, and I think that, look, like just to read it back to back and just agreeing with what you're saying. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. And then the psalm gives us, this is the gate of the Lord through which the righteous will enter. I'll give you thanks for you answered me. You have become my salvation. So I mean, it's so intimately, connected, isn't it? This whole, and like to your point, the fact that the next text is the stone the builders rejected. I mean, I was talking to some friends actually just this week about how when you read the early church fathers, what's fascinating, and those of us as modern critical historical scholars get a little jumpy about this, but the early church fathers were not jumpy about this at all. When they read the Psalms, they are absolutely crystal clear that this is about Jesus, right? They do, they're not going, well, obviously this is from this point in history and now we're able to apply it to Jesus. They read it and they're like, yeah, this is Jesus. This is the Psalms are being prophetic here and they know that one is coming. And at some level, if we can dispense with some of our modern historical critical anxieties, you can see their point. Right? Like at very least, Jesus is reading that psalm and saying, "Yes, this is me. This is." And John 10 is to me, is exactly to your point. Is Jesus saying, "Yeah, I am what you read about in Psalm 118."
Yeah, completely. And I think that adds weight then to. And this is what I loved about what you said right at the beginning, that Jesus didn't come as a gatekeeper, but he came as the gate. And I love this sort of language that you see this and you get this. So in verse 3 of chapter 10, he says, the gatekeeper opens the gate for him and the sheep listen to his voice. So he makes a distinction between a gatekeeper and the actual gate itself. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they'll run away from him. And then he leads into, now I am the gate for the sheep. Now, and I think then this is what's powerful, David, for me. If we're going into chapter 10, and at the end of chapter 9, we're still in this battle between the religious community and Jesus over this man, over sight and blindness, then Jesus is saying something in the gate that is connected to a leadership issue. to a spiritual leadership issue. And I think all that allusion to sort of not following the voice of the stranger, but only following the voice of the one they know, etc. I think it's to do with Jesus's voice at this time, as opposed to the voice of the religious community. And of course, he's even more explicit. Once he gets to the gate language, he says, "Very truly I say to you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers." Wow. Then he says again, doubles it, "I am the gate." So he repeats it. Whoever enters through me will be saved. So we could allude to the blind man there. They will come in and go out and find pasture, but the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. So I think in setting himself up as a gate, the gate that opens up for the righteous, the gate that leads to the righteous presence of God, Jesus is in fact saying that the religious community are not only acting like gatekeepers, but they are blocking the way for men and women to actually find righteousness and find the language of Psalm 118, the gate, the righteous gate of the Lord, almost the gate that opens up and allows that to come in. So I think it's even more powerful and pronounced. And of course, ultimately, Jesus gets rejected by that religious community. But he in terms of using that language, the stone's rejected, but on that stone, that cornerstone, a great edifice is built, not a temple, but a living community that will be built on him, for which he is the gate of that community.
And I mean, if I can go a little granular for a second, notice the language development between verses 7 and 10. So Jesus again says to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep."
Yeah.
So the first time we hear the "I am" statement here, it's ego eimi, to use that Greek phrase. I am the gate for the sheep, right? But in verse 9, it's just "I am the gate," right? And now here's what I'm trying to suggest here. Thinking about the whole conversation we're going here, Jesus is not a gatekeeper, right? I mean, we've said this enough, so people hear it. Jesus is not a gatekeeper. As a result, the identifying features of everybody in this passage are self-inflicted. They're not inflicted by Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So the thief is choosing to be a thief, and the sheep is choosing to be a sheep. But here comes the irony. I am the gate for the sheep. So the sheep can come through this gate. The sheep can enter in here and listen to me. The sheep can hear my voice. And you could then say, but not the thieves, right? And you could be drawn into gatekeeping yourself, right? That, wait, but wait a minute. The Pharisees are the thieves and we are the sheep. But notice then Jesus comes back another time. All right, you got that? Now he says, as if he's saying, okay, have you got this? Thieves and bandits came before me, but the sheep don't listen to them. Now he doesn't say I am the gate from the sheep. He says, I am the gate. And then he drops this stunningly powerful word, whoever. Whoever enters by me will be saved, right? So now you get this, I think, this fundamentally important thing. Let me try and say it like this. The thief is only the thief because the thief has decided that they have to hike over the wall, steal the animal, and run away. But the thief has been welcomed also to enter through the door and come and be one of the sheep. So you get this stunning invitation hidden in here that Jesus is not gatekeeping the Pharisees. He's not inverting the gatekeeping, going, okay, Pharisees, you're now on the outside and we're on the inside. He's just like, I'm the door, and whoever enters in through this door is a sheep. And the stunning thing is there's now therefore absolutely no reason to be a thief because the only reason you would steal something is because you need something you don't have. And what Jesus seems to be saying in here is, but you could just walk in. like this, it's like you're stealing from a supermarket where everything is free. And I mean, maybe I'm over pushing it, John, but I think that transition from I am the gate for the sheep to I am the gate whoever enters by me, I think it's stunning.
So good. That is so good. I hadn't quite seen that before. and the way you've brought that is so good. And of course, it makes total sense even in the Johannine text, because within that text you have at least two Pharisees we know who are named who entered the gate.
Yes.
I mean, I was quite moved by you. I think it's so good that the whoever is extended to the very community that are trying to gatekeep.
Yes. Yeah.
And Nicodemus, of course, and Joseph of Arimathea, two members of the ruling council. We know, well, we meet them in the story of the gospel. We've alluded to them many times, but of course, at the burial of Jesus, both these men pop up and publicly identify. And it's like at the worst possible moment, the crucifixion of Jesus, the cursing of Jesus, they recognize, actually, he is the gate. He is the gate, and we're identifying with that. Absolutely gorgeous, and I love that, and for me, that really does fit with the general gospel trajectory of Jesus around the Pharisees. I think sometimes we just think, I mean, again, we've talked about this before. We just think Jesus hated the Pharisees and the Pharisees hated him. But of course, it's not the case. There is a pull and push going on all the time here. And obviously, the closer we get to the end of Jesus' life, the more intense and extreme some of that pull and push becomes. But Jesus is clearly keeping the door open. And that connection from gate of the sheep to whoever, absolutely magnificent. I hadn't, again, our listeners, be encouraged. I have read John 10 a million times, and I hadn't quite, like, to use David's language, granular. I hadn't quite seen the detail of that. I just, probably in my head, I read the second time, I am the gate of the sheep. I read that again. My brain was telling me that's for the sheep, and actually it's for the whosoever. Wow. Come
So,
on.
I mean, think about, to just double down on your point, just because we're having fun, right? Think about, I am the gate, whoever, right? Now think about, think about, it's so good. Think about Jesus having a conversation with a Pharisee in John 3, and he says, God so loved the world, he gave his only son, so that anyone who believes in him, everyone who believes in, everyone who trusts in him, same language, do you trust in the Son of Man, that he says in John 9. So you've actually, ironically, before we even hear that Jesus is the gate for whoever, we've had a, I mean, I'm being playful, not to disparage Nicodemus, but we've had a gatekeeper enter through that gate.
Completely. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the gorgeous sort of conversation Jesus has with Nicodemus in chapter 3. We don't quite know the conclusion of it. It seems he seems a bit like nonplussed by it all. But we know from chapter 7 and then from chapter 19, all right, this man's on a journey, which ultimately concludes with a very public declaration of his followership of Jesus. And I love that. And I hadn't seen that before. I hadn't seen the connection of, obviously I knew John 3:16, whoever.
Yes.
My goodness, we were raised on that. And the fact that that's with Nicodemus, but I hadn't made the connection of the whoever of chapter 10. And of course, the context of that whoever is a conversation with the Pharisees. Wow, that is so good. That is so good. And I love that. And again, but again, I think that's why we need to give gate, I am the gate, a separate airing to not just letting it dovetail into I'm the good shepherd. I think the good shepherd speaks on its own. And of course, the two images do collide and come together. But he's saying something as weighty in the gate as he is in the Good Shepherd, and I think that's why it's been worthwhile us even reflecting at length on that one, because it's so important.
Yeah, and I was thinking, even as you were saying that, so there's the whosoever in verse 9, I am the gate, whoever enters by me. But then in verse 1, you've got that anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate is a thief. And I do think there's something really beautiful there for us, that Jesus isn't categorizing people into, sheep and Pharisees. He's categorizing people into are you coming in through the door that is open for you?
Yeah, very
And
good.
I always think of, whenever I think about this sort of language, I think of like Robert Farrar Cappon's work, where he in one of his commentaries on the parable of the great banquet, he's like, the only people not at this banquet are
Yep.
people who have tried really, really, really hard to not be at this banquet,
Not be
right? And there's a level of which, Jesus is not going to categorize people out, but we are able to approach Christ like a thief. Right.
Mm.
And like, what does it look like to approach Christ like a thief? And I think we often internalize that to say, oh, that's a matter of our own heart. But actually,
Mm.
Jesus, I think, is saying to us, be very careful with your gatekeeping. Be very
Mm.
careful of becoming the type of person who says, no, you can't follow Jesus, or you're too far from Jesus. It's almost as if Jesus is like, hey, wait a minute, that sounds a bit thiefy.
Yeah.
Like when
Yeah.
you start pointing at someone and saying, how dare you lecture us, or do you think you're, like the Pharisees in John 9.
Mm.
It's as if
Mm.
Jesus is like, hey, wait a minute, David, sounded a bit bandity right there. You might want to be careful of that. You need to sound more sheepy. And I'm being
Yeah.
playful, but there is that level of come through
Mm.
the door.
Mm.
Stop trying to, steal people from inside the door. I think it's wonderful up to the minute guidance for the church in any age, because we
Mm.
as humans, I mean, my goodness, we always have that threat, don't we? What are they doing in here? And I don't even just mean in church. We do it everywhere.
Everywhere.
The wrong type of person at your gym, the wrong type of person at your favorite restaurant. Like this happens to us. We all, anyone who's ever taken a plane flight has, like, oh, I hope I don't get some chatty person next to me on the plane, or,
Yeah.
I hope I don't get someone that I sat on a plane recently and the guy brought a takeout burger with him and sat in the middle seat, and he had this like kind of greasy takeout burger. I could smell it for the whole flight. I mean, it's just, and I'm being playful, but it's like, it's just in us that we
Yeah.
gatekeep. And
Oh.
Jesus is saying, like, when this seeps into our religious life, and
Mm.
now we're gatekeeping people away from the good shepherd, like, Lord have mercy, we're in a bad space when we do that, something. But no,
Mm.
I don't mean a bad space with Jesus, because
No.
he's the gate. He's just inviting us
No.
in. We're in a bad space in ourselves, right? We
Yeah.
have chosen to become a thief.
No, it's so good. So good. And you're absolutely right. There is a gatekeeper in us all. And I suppose we've got to keep reminding ourselves that we got in through the gate. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like that gate of grace and mercy and loving kindness open to us, and we didn't deserve to be in that gate. Like the blind man, we could have been left in our blindness, and we could have been left in our destitution, but Jesus saw him. Jesus saw us, came to us, and transformed our lives. And I think one of the challenges is when you've been around this a long time, you can very easily and subtly, and not because you set out deliberately to do it, but you can fall into the trap of becoming ever so subtly self-righteous, and therefore judgy, and therefore you become a bit more of a gatekeeper than someone who says, actually, let me point you to the gate. The gate can help you. So I love that, and I think that challenge comes to us all afresh, and I think it's very, very powerful, indeed, as we think about that, because we don't want to be associated. I mean, we tend to think of the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. We tend to think of that as perhaps Satan, the enemy, the adversary. And of course, that certainly fits his description, absolutely. But actually, Jesus doesn't seem to be talking about him there. He seems to be talking about a group of people who know the Torah by memory. And he's saying to them, be careful that you don't become the thief that steals, kills, and destroys. Like you've tried to be with the blind man. You've tried to steal something from him. You've tried to strip something from him. You've banished him from communion. You've banished him from gathering in the house of the Lord, and actually he's experienced the touch of the Messiah. So there's a sense in which, if you go back into chapter 9, they have become the ones who've tried to steal, kill, and destroy the work of Messiah. So again, it's one of the dangers of ripping these gorgeous statements out of context, that it very easily fits with the Satan, but actually it can as easily fit with us, that we can be contributors to stealing, killing, and destroying, and be the opposite of what the gate wants to be.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying that there, John, I couldn't help but think, I mean, who is Jesus talking to?
Yeah.
He's talking to a group of people who love the Lord, who are absolutely committed to the truth of Scripture, that believe that the Scripture is the way of life. And, so at some level, it's like, it's so easy to do, oh, the thief, that's the Satan. But, it is, the hosts of the Two Text podcast, two guys who love the Lord, love Scripture, believe there's life if we listen to it. But Jesus is coming to the yous and me, to any one of us in the church, really, and saying, hey, listen, look what can happen to you if you start becoming... If you start forgetting that I'm the door, you're not the gatekeeper. And it's interesting, John, as well. I was just, as you were saying that, I was looking at verse 9, whoever enters by me will be saved. The Greek has a lovely, lovely continuity to it. So in English, it makes sense that we translate it, we'll come in, we'll go out and find pasture. But there's a level where the Greek seems to be, there's a continuation. Whoever enters into it will be saved and will be coming in and going out and finding pasture. There's this is a constantly renewing process of inning and outing and pasturing. And I was fascinated. I'm just curious what it's doing in your heart. But there's this notion of pasturing. I mean, it draws me back to Psalm 23, for example. But this continuation of the care of Christ, the coming, it's not like, oh, they're in the sheepfold and now I'm holding them in the sheepfold forever. But there's this motion that's going on here of we're coming in and we're going out and we're resting in the good things of God, which is in stark contrast to the gatekeepers stealing, killing, and destroying. And I don't know, I just found... I think what was interesting as well is the stealing, the killing, and the destroying is not continual. It's the structure of that sentence is, and they kill, they steal, they destroy. But Jesus is coming in, going out, finding pasture. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, I think it fits beautifully with the context of the religious community, because I think if you look at chapter 9, what have you got there? You've got control. So a group of people seeking to control someone, control what they think, control what they conclude, control their views on both them and this man, and control ultimately where they go. So you've got the very opposite of what you've just described. You've got a religious community literally saying to someone, you are banished, you cannot come into this pasture, you cannot be here, you cannot move freely, you are now restricted. We have control over this conversation. And of course, what the gate is offering is not control, but freedom, opportunity. So the gate, if you like, swings both ways. The gate sort of allows the sheep to come in, and you have a measure of something very unique, very specific. There's a beautiful protective nuance within that. There's a fellowshipping nuance, but then they can go out, because there's clearly, if the sheep are going to prosper, they can't stay in that pen. They've got to be able to go with the shepherd. For example, this is what's leading us on already, the next I am, but they've got to be able to go with the shepherd into good pasture within that. So in the gate, you don't have control. You have freedom, the freedom to come and to go in the gate, through the gate. So again, it's all connected with the gate. So it's not just you've got the freedom to go and do whatever you want. It's the freedom to come and go with to find the pasture, with the implication being it's through that gate so that you can both go and return. And you're getting the opposite to what I think you're getting in chapter 9, which is very much about control, manipulation, and power. Whereas the gate, it seems to be showing us an opposite dynamic to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what I'm resonating with, and even like that agency that Christ gives, like you come in, you go out, and you find pasture, right? Like Christ, the Good Shepherd, is leading us to good spaces. But we need to rest in it. We need to trust him that he has taken us to good spaces, and that his voice will lead us well, and that we don't need to follow the voice of a stranger. And then you get this sort of notion then that is all part of Christ's description of what we would call the abundant life.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately now we hear it from Jesus, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly.
Absolutely. Which, of course, you have alluded to it already. We'll probably come back to it in the next I Am. But you can't hear language like have life and have it to the full and not be drawn back to the magnificence of a psalm like Psalm 23, which is absolutely dripping with life and abundance. It's saturated with this idea. The Lord is my shepherd. I want for nothing. I shall not be. I mean, my goodness. And then, you get to the end of that psalm, that his goodness and mercy will hunt me down all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And again, look at the illusioner. I will dwell in the house of the Lord. We get to dwell in the house of the Lord by going through the gate. But there's also the connection to the shepherd. So, I mean, it's definitely something undoubtedly we will lean into in our next couple of podcasts. But it's a beautiful connecting point. So he takes us to this point of, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. And then his very next statement is the one about him being the shepherd. So this is about leading us into something that is fuller and greater and better. And, that fullness and greatness is absolutely, I think Jesus is about to riff off magnificently one of the greatest psalms ever written, and also probably affirming that he is the substance of these great ideas to lead us to life and to lead us to fullness.
And I mean, of course, what's interesting, just as a sort of quirk of weird facts that David likes, in the Revised Common Lectionary that many of the churches use around the world, in the first year of that 3-year cycle, when the story of the man born blind is told, the psalm for that day is the 23rd psalm. So even though that day you don't read the I am the good shepherd, it's interesting that the form of the way the lectionary wants to teach people is to go, by the way, hey, this is what we're seeing in John 9 is Jesus the shepherd.
So that's it for this episode. Now, we know there's always more to explore, and we encourage you to dive into the text and do that. If you like this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you rated it, reviewed, or shared it. We also appreciate all our listeners who financially support the show, sharing the weight of producing the podcast. If you'd like to support us, visit twotext.com. But that's all for now. So until next time, from David and I, it's goodbye.